All right, welcome to the high. What are we calling it? High mark.
Hi, Mark, baby. Is that not
Welcome to the
taken?
High Mark podcast, episode 2. We have Alex Flanagan, Tyler, aka Howard Flanagan, and myself, Jesse Carstairs, where we're talking about tomatoes, tomato sauce, the lack thereof in certain countries. We're
Yes.
talking about Indians, Comanches, Sioux. We've been talking even about French riots and Social Security. Should we be changing the age?
Ooh, yes, exactly. Maybe it's time. We're going to talk about all this good stuff.
Oh, dude, the Social Security, that can definitely get me going.
For sure.
And I'll just jump right into it. I don't know why the Democrats or the Republicans just don't nut up, come together and say, we have to come up with something different because it's not working.
Right.
Back in 2015, when I was in college, not 2015, I'm not that young, 2005, freshman year,
Mm.
4 people had to pay for one. It took 4 people paying in to pay for one person receiving funds from Social Security. That was fucking 20 years ago.
Right.
20 years ago. Who knows what that number is now? We've had both political parties, both the Democrats and Republicans, collectively dip into Social Security. So when you're stealing from the piggy bank, you can't expect that it's going to be taking care of everybody. But
Exactly.
also, I would get rid of it because it's never been the intent of the government to actually take care of the people. We're not here. The government was never intended to be our babysitter post work. There was a period in time where we would take care of ourselves through savings, which our country doesn't have a savings, but the American people used to be big savers.
Yeah.
And there used to be a period of time where kids actually took care of their parents financially, but it was a cultural thing. And then the government comes out with Social Security, we're just going to take care of you. It's just, I wouldn't just cut it cold turkey because we do have people like both of our parents who have paid in. So I'd do some sort of age. If you're under 45 or 40 or 38 or 27, whatever was agreed on collectively and mathematically worked out, I'd be like, we got to go to a different system. We got to buck up, put our working boots on, and actually save and invest for our futures as individuals.
So that would be the alternative in that case, though, just to save in that essence?
I would essentially, because of the factors of inflation and other such things, just the cost of living increases that are, some are manageable, some just aren't. And probably the pension funds is like a good alternative at this point for that. But then scale that up to actually all the Social Security funds would be put towards a combination of stocks and bonds, and you hold them until a certain time or you get penalized, as we do now. I think that's probably a good solution and probably better than, and probably earn a better return than the current social thing, which is at a huge deficit. We just spend it before we even have it, and then it's like a credit card is what they're using it in the government right now for. But people are notoriously bad at planning for their future. That's why the systems are everywhere. But there could be better ways to do it. I think there's no doubt about it for sure.
Anything's better than what we got going now, I'd say.
And it's a spicy take. I mean, this is going to fire people up. If you say give us Social Security, even politicians can't fucking say that. Like even
they're scared. So there's 2 things. One,
oh yeah, they are.
historically, Americans used to be savers. It's just today we're not savers because we're trying to keep up with the Joneses. And then,
we're consumers.
I always think that there's more pieces to solving a puzzle than just what I said. So like how he was saying inflation, we got to fix the money problem because it shouldn't be so expensive to live with technology.
We can definitely manage it, but
living down and the quality of living up, and we haven't been doing that due to the expansion of the currency supply.
Money printing accelerates inflation, but there's never been anything that arrests inflation altogether. They've tried literally executing people in the past. There's nothing that can just the mechanisms of supply and demand and requirements, and sometimes the field is productive and sometimes it's not. There's just so many inputs that inflation's never been able to completely arrest. But one thing that accelerates it beyond all reason, usually destroying the country, is money printing. So I'll say
like
definitely money
32
printing is
trillion in debt.
money printing is the core of inflation growth, but it's definitely, you won't be able to arrest it altogether. And so since you can't arrest it altogether, your best bet is to invest it in productive means such as the stocks, more efficient companies that can put that money to better use and give you a little return back in the form of dividend or a stock return, to keep ahead of it. But you can definitely reduce the amount at which it's growing for sure by stop printing so much freaking money. That's for damn sure. But
Yeah, and
you can't stop
to
it
the
though.
pensions, Alex, I would actually be someone who said you can't do state-funded pensions. I would leave that only to the private sector because
Mm,
private companies used to do pensions because they actually could understand where their profits were going to be, and
mm,
if they couldn't pay, they would go out of business. Like Kodak. Kodak used to give everyone a pension.
right.
Everyone had a pension, private company. But now a state, when you look at California, their promised and unpaid pensions in the state of California equals to $48,000 per fucking person in that state.
Right.
That's crazy because they're a state that's going to promise you X amount, six figures when you're retired in all
And
these state level jobs.
promising
So,
money amounts on,
yes.
It doesn't seem to
on
work.
company returns is a risky game.
Now, maybe there's a state like North Dakota who their pensions are fine and everyone is okay. But it's not the case in California. It's not the case in New York, New Jersey. So that has to be something that is looked at as well.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think, I have no objection to whether it's state or private. Honestly, it's more of an alternative to the current Social Security way of
Yeah.
forcing people.
Yeah.
It's more of like my point is essentially, I guess, people are so bad at planning for the future that we have to have some mechanism of trying to force them to save for their future, and one would be private pensions, and that is exactly
Yeah.
what the companies in the past did. And there's a consensus emerging amongst most people is now that we've had so much time pass. When it first happened, of course, they promised us getting rid of the pensions would be better, but in time, I think the workers were a lot better off when they got full security, job security, instead of this what's it called now, where you have like 5 jobs and none of them have any health care or anything, and you're just like floating
Yeah.
around, you know. And
You're just in the rat race, man.
yeah, and no pension, no security, no community that grows from being
Yeah.
like, if I work at Ford plant for a long time and I do a good job and I get them a pension, I feel invested in the community. I want to take care of my neighborhood. I want to, these kind of things where now it's just like, woo, I got 5 jobs and whatever.
Dude, and speaking of Ford and take home, you got to think when Henry Ford was paying guys $5 a day, they got to keep 100% of that $5 a day.
Right.
And to us, we don't even like correlate. Oh, well, it's $5 a day, and it's like, well, when you look at that, they were getting paid $1.25, we'll just say an hour, and it was actual silver, and what that silver is worth today.
Yeah.
It's like they were making pretty good freaking money, and they got to keep 100% of it.
For
And
sure.
due to the cost of goods, you only needed one income in that household.
Yeah.
So obviously, there's something wrong with the money.
Yeah, it's become a
When
meme
you
at this
can
point.
barely
Yeah.
make it with 2 income household.
Seriously.
Yeah, company profit margins in pursuit of things. They also did have worse returns relative to today, like say Apple and stuff. But I think that's where the moral comes in. I don't necessarily think the government should force their hand, but also pay your workers if you want them to be better part of the community. You need to provide them with a pension, a stable job, a stable opportunity. If they're throwaway and you just throw money at them until you don't need them anymore, then it's a reciprocal relationship. And I think we've all gotten to this case where the money's the only thing that matters, not the community and not building up any of these things. And we don't want to force the companies to reduce their profit because they're going to obviously they're not going to be able to make as much profit if they have to pay out pensions. I mean, obviously, right? So it hits their bottom line, but at the same time, you had a better quality of life overall for the community and for each individual worker. There's a consensus, I think, over time emerging that was a better way to do it. But in pursuit of Chinese manufacturing profits, we let all the gates off and just move it all over there, and at any cost possible. They don't pay them pensions over there, so we're not going to be able to compete with that.
Yeah, and
They work
Alex,
them so hard they jump off the bridges.
we don't want our people to jump off any bridges. But Alex, I remember you speaking once about the increase in the average wage versus the increase in the CEO salary across the United States. When you remember that, you're going to have to pump that in.
For sure,
But
things like
also,
that. Yeah, those correlations are different than back then. Yeah, so that's also another reason why they had lower margins and lower, but in return you got, a stable community, good workers that loved their company, that waved the flag up for it instead of it's just some throwaway thing like meaningless. My job is meaningless kind of thing.
And back in the day when those companies were paying out that, and they might have had smaller margins, and even if they were paying pensions, they probably weren't paying as much in different variations of taxes too. They weren't paying payroll tax.
The tax burden was much different. Yeah, for sure.
They weren't paying healthcare penalties if they didn't pay someone's healthcare. I mean, there were so many other costs that they did not incur, which allowed them to do those things, like the high wages and pensions.
For sure, yeah, those two forces are pushing on each other. When the companies go overseas, less taxable revenue, they raise it and come up with new taxes to try to squeeze as much as they can. The two, before you know it, we're way upside down. And but also to clarify, of course, the conditions in China are improving. But of course, as we know, I just was referring to Foxconn, where they did install suicide nets in the buildings to prevent the people from jumping down. That's what I'm referring to. But of course, I was just exaggerating. But we, even just in population, we can't really compete on the labor market if we're going to try to pay our workers the same as China. For us, we need to find a way to provide a great quality thing at our wages, and that's the real trick. And it's going to take both tax reform and Social Security reform and many other things, for sure.
Well, I think
monetary
reform. Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm.
I don't think many people would mind paying such high taxes if things actually got done in the sense that they do, like in the Netherlands, and
that's the most frustrating thing. Yeah,
exactly. Good education, and we actually had good, everything, good infrastructure and everything. Then it wouldn't be a bad thing, I don't think, to pay.
Perhaps, Ty, this would help too better than me just putting up this screen. But if you could just search federal budget pie chart and put it on the screen, or if you could, Jesse. This is a really good indicator of and why we have like major ticking time bombs that need reform, and everyone's just like, yeah, it's cool, bro. So the blue, as you see here, is Medicare, Medicaid of our federal budget. The next one is in the big red is Social Security, and the yellow is basically our military spending. Okay. So the top three, and actually the military spending is dwarfed by Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. So while everyone does go on about the military spending, and it's definitely high, for our it's not crazy for our GDP, but it's a lot. It's not what's sucking up all the money by not even close.
And you know what is crazy is when you tell people on one certain political spectrum, we'll just say the left, that how much more we spend on Medicare and Medicaid than military, they never believe it.
Yeah,
they're like, no, no.
And you could literally how you could demonstrate if you literally
quickly look it up.
You could search 4 words on Google and you could get your answers if you wanted. To know the answer.
Don't get me wrong, this might offend some people on the right. If I was president, I would be making military cuts as well for that budget. Hell of a lot in Medicaid, Medicare, but also in military.
Yeah,
because I don't think.
And this is where This is where I disagree with Trump's approach. Is if we lean on NATO more and get them to spend more, but actually tighten and strengthen the alliance, then our direct military spending can go down. Germany is a massive major power and drastically underspends its GDP amount that it should. Because of those, there's something in the past that they have the thing. And so as a result, though, they're like phobia about military spending. And so we call them out regularly. But if they even just went to the agreed GDP amount, we could let off the gas that much. So They make great tanks, they make great weapons, blah blah blah. So
Do you think we'd actually do that though? Do you think we'd ever actually let off the gas if we didn't have were forced to?
the politicians is one thing, but if we
Yeah.
were actually strategically smart, that would be the game: is
Right.
make NATO
Yeah.
stronger and have everyone on the board, and then we could let off our individual nation amount of spending, is what I'm referring to. Then the
Yeah.
NATO would still be just as strong, but without, and still we still don't have to worry about China's rapidly expanding fleets and everything. But we could not. And right now, we'd have to, if we're going to carry the main burden against a
Right.
rapidly expanding China's fleet, then we have to keep spending more. And so more of that budget needs to keep being in the yellow. So that sucks. And we don't want that. We don't want that situation.
Harry
But,
Truman warned us against the military-industrial complex, so I'm going to
For
say
sure.
it will never happen
Right.
unless we somehow cleaned shop in the House and the Senate.
Right. The
It's
political
only
part of
way.
it. And you're totally right. I agree. The reality would be that Germany spends their GDP and we're still spending as much. So that's probably it. But in theory, we could, if we were strategic thinkers, we could maneuver it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
In return, though, this is how much gets spent on things that are pretty important. The entire federal budget, 3% on education, food and agriculture, 4%, transportation, so all of our road networks, 4%. So since Medicare and Medicaid, Social Security, and military are taking up so much of the budget, we only have enough to allocate 3% to education. That's fucking insane.
Yeah. Like if you told those stats to like an alien visiting the planet and they're just
Right.
like, yeah, we spend 3% of our total GDP on this. It's like,
Energy
You'd be like,
infrastructure.
oh,
you
that's
say?
why you're so dumb.
That's why you
That's
dumb.
why.
Okay.
Oh, that's why the world is energy infrastructure. So we could spend a whole bunch of money on just even making the existing coal plants better, the existing energy production plants better,
Yeah.
the transmission lines to and from the major cities, blah blah blah. Well, it sure would be a lot easier if we spent more than 1% of the federal budget on energy infrastructure. So, like, Jesus, 1% on
Jesus.
housing, 3% on international or education, and 1% on science research and development, and 1% on the labor force. So abysmal. I mean, these are ones,
Yeah.
and of course, the veterans. So all the veterans get separated from Social Security and Medicare, and they actually take up 4%. So even that, I would be all for increasing that to a good 8%. Give these guys lush lives.
Yeah.
But we only spend 4% right now on the veterans because Medicare, Medicaid, and everything else is swallowing everything available. So that needs massive reform.
The real pension should be for our vets.
Absolutely. That's the thing. I don't know if you could put on the screen, but it's easier to see that if one of you guys could than me trying to explain it. But it just goes to show, like, when I read articles, people are like, we really need major reform on Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, because it's going to swallow the federal budget. It's going to what are when you think of those things and those costs, what is kind of correlated with that? Age, basically, right? And what is the United States doing overall? Aging. So the size of that budget is going to grow and grow and grow and grow. And without reform, we're going to spend not 3% on education, 1% on education, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and the largest population, largest group, the boomers, are only getting older and older and older.
Yeah. With no reform on the system that's supposed to provide them with resources.
And I said 1% on energy.
Literally,
I think
1% on energy infrastructure. Yeah, would be so 1%. So like you could even just take the existing plants, invest way more into the getting better energy actually delivered to the actual endpoint right now. So we have like these old ancient fiddly fucking power lines and shit. Like you could build better power lines if you had the money. And that's the kind of thing that I think governments are useful for, is that kind of thing. And then, but instead they're spending 1% of that on that. So
it's
in it. Sorry, Howard, go.
I was just gonna say it's crazy that we invest all this money into infrastructure, and yet we still, on top of that, have to pay for energy because our infrastructure is so poor, and we can't, produce that much energy to like.
And that does actually,
Like
when
water.
you're talking about the costs rising, imagine if the infrastructure is aging, it's more expensive. It de
Yeah.
facto becomes more expensive to ship the same amount of energy through
Right.
those same aging lines. So this is exactly where one of those where like we could reduce the cost for everybody and
Yeah.
therefore lower
Across the
those
board.
pressures on everybody by just spending more on infrastructure. But they literally don't have it. It's not in the budget when Medicare needs 2% more next year. So
And and if we actually did real reform,
Mm-hmm.
budget reform, like, dude, I wish they made me president. I'd just go in there and fucking, people would hate it.
you're
Just like
fired.
I expect.
You're fired.
But
You're fired.
if we actually really put money towards our energy
Oh
and
man,
infrastructure,
Dude.
we could have energy at zero.
Yes.
We could literally
absolutely.
make it free.
We could really push it. I mean, we could push it way closer than it is right now, like way closer,
Mhm.
and it's absurd. It's a complicated thing, but at least one of those is that been tracked to be that the insurance mechanisms that bill the Medicaid is a really crooked upside down system, and it's also protected by laws, so it's not easily changeable. This insurance can essentially bill, so the hospital will bill me $4 for a piece of gauze. Then the insurance company can add some premium for processing, and then that gauze de facto becomes $7 when it
Mhm.
actually gets as a bill to the Medicare. So the
Yep.
budget ends up being, a lot of this budget is to actually fuel private companies, medical companies' profits. And I'm all for profits, but if you're building your third giant house off of essentially Medicare money, that's our collective money. It's our tax money. So that needs to be strictly reformed. That's not acceptable.
Oh, it is so crazy that there are actual laws out there that, Alex, let's say you are a physician, Ty, you're a patient. Let's just say you get your big toe operated on, and by law, Alex cannot tell you that product A, if you bought it through him directly with cash, is $1.
Mm-hmm.
He cannot tell you that, but if it goes through your insurance, it's $10. No bullshit.
Right.
1,000% markup. By law, he can't tell you, well, if you just pay us with your debit card, it's only $1. But if it's going to go through your insurance, it's going to be $10.
And think of such a well-established and long-term industry as insurance. You
Right.
really have to wonder why there's such a large Senate federal lobby of insurance. And then you think, well, recently, as you're saying, now they passed laws that force doctors to choose an insurance group, and then that insurance group can force him to limit what he can prescribe and who to and
Yes,
to
dude.
what place.
And in that sense,
why do they need a lobby?
Yeah, the insurance people become the health advisors at that point because they're allowing whatever any medication is actually accessible. In that point, it's like, how the hell did it get so screwed up? We got to that point where
and I think at least part of it is where if you have lobbyists having fun and throwing millions at the senators there, essentially with enough grease, the wheel starts to turn, even if that wheel shouldn't turn. And that's where you have where doctors are making nonsensical financial decisions of a $10 piece of gauze. That's like, dude, what? It's $1. I could order on Amazon right now, like literally, like. So if the doctor should be able to order it on Amazon is what I'm saying, but he can't. He literally can't. They made laws. They lobbied him to pass laws so the doctor can't order it on Amazon. He has to order it through his Medicare-approved insurance provider, who strangely charges $10 for that same thing.
Yeah.
It's and then bizarre. On the flip side of that, I've heard like Quicken and like the companies who are like the intermediate for those tax companies, they also lobby these senators and Congress to keep these tax laws ambiguous and kind of hard to work around so that they can continue as the middleman in that sense.
And in a balanced flow, this is my approach with lobbying is like, if it's a new rapidly evolving industry, then you're going to need some lobbyists, and they essentially help consult for constant industry changes and try to guide it as best we can, right? But insurance has been around for some time now. And so get this, fellas. In 2022, the pharmaceutical and health products industry in the United States spent the most on lobbying efforts, totaling to about $373 million. in the Senate and the House. Insane.
Dirty money.
Insane.
Yeah, what? Yeah.
The same industry spends 46% of all the ad revenue on television.
And so and in the same year, so that's the health industry. In the same year, the insurance industry spent about 158 million US dollars on lobbying in Washington. So they're just pouring money into this.
Whoa.
And then suddenly you have what comes out is laws where doctors are limited. They can't buy common sense shit.
Yeah.
So then you got to think, how much profit are they actually making?
That's what I'm saying. It's like these guys is not. When people talk about these things, they say, okay, well, if the profit margin is razor thin, okay, let's be reasonable here. We're not talking about a razor thin industry here, fellas. We're not talking about that.
This is another reason why
Massive
I say
profits.
we do not have capitalism, and people get offended when I say that. We have a crony capitalism.
Yeah.
At best,
it's like socialism for the rich, and as most unregulated, ruthless capitalism as you can for everybody else. It's like the worst of the two.
Well, Alex, I mean, you described an oligarch where the companies are in bed with
so much
government.
So. Yes.
Yeah.
They are making it. That's an oligarch. That is literally
no
different than when they say Russian oligarchs. It's like American oligarchs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, just the hundreds of millions to just lobby them. We're not even talking about anything else, fellas. We're talking about them whining and dining and something else with that money in Washington. And then laws get passed in their favor as lobbying.
And I don't know too much about it. How much of that lobbying is actually transparent in that sense, where we see, the whole process of what's being lobbied, what they're lobbying for, and all that?
To be honest, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. Yeah,
I'm not sure. Yeah,
that's a very good question.
I feel like a lot of questions don't really stump Alex and I at the same time, but I don't know that one either.
That's a good question, and I'm just going to throw it out there that maybe it's probably not, because a lot of politicians, favor.
I'm going to assume that it's not much. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm just going to assume.
But even that shocked me. I didn't even realize it was that amount. And again, like, let's say it's a fast moving industry like AI, and they're trying to get some guardrails and stuff up. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Maybe some lobbying is going to be required on both sides, but pharmaceuticals and insurance have been around for a while. I don't see the need for 158 million to be poured into Washington at this stage to get laws passed in regard to the insurance industry. That's not
even if it's AI and getting lobbying, it's who's paying for the 158 million?
Yeah.
VC firms, angels, startups, they can't afford that.
Right.
So a couple million, I get it, because you are trying to be like, okay, how can we work in this space? How can we be all coherent where government's not getting mad at us, SEC's not getting mad at us, and we're not going to wait for a doom and gloom thing to happen, because there is the anomaly chance that someone can use AI for terrible, terrible things.
Stuff like that. Right.
Yeah. But they ain't paying 58 million bucks?
158 million just in 2022. This is per year, fellas.
Yeah.
This is a year. So, wow. And then you wonder, you go to get your insurance and it's so insane, and it's gone up 20% since a year and a half, and you're wondering why and how and why the cost, and then boom, you look at they're pouring 158 of their return right into Washington to further strengthen their position, essentially.
Or they price you out of your plan. You could have a plan that you love, and they'll just keep raising the price so much on you that you can't afford it anymore, because that plan was too good to where it didn't cost enough, and it did them no favor. So they'll price you out of your plan. And it literally happened to me.
With a very easy Google search, we essentially found that a lot of the costs of why our plans keep pricing us out is because they're taking hundreds of millions of it and dumping it in Washington to further, not even for like, oh, cool, they're doing R&D to fix Alzheimer's or something. You put 150, you put 158 million per year into Alzheimer's research. Awesome, dude. Okay, cool. That's why my premium's going up. But no, it's to go to Washington is why, at least part of it, maybe not all of it, but it's part of it, undoubtedly.
Yeah. So I'm sure both of you guys can get the sense. Both of you guys can get the sense from me that I've never been the biggest fan of big pharma, but I still want them to be able to make profit for R&D
Right.
because they are going to develop something at some time where I'm like, fuck yeah, that helped so and so's grandma legitimately,
Right.
and
Absolutely.
didn't give her crazy anal leakage.
For sure.
You know, there's
They,
always those side effects, anal leakage,
let's
possible
improve that.
suicide.
Also,
And
I'll
then
be
But
willing
it's
to
like,
spend a couple
well, then
hundred
they give
million.
you.
I'll
Well,
be
then they give
willing
you
to
the
spend,
pill to fix the symptoms, and
yeah,
then
I'll,
those pills have symptoms, and then you got to
yeah,
take the pills to get the symptoms of the
yes.
symptoms.
but
So my
Yeah,
point is,
158 mil would be worth it if I could reduce the anal leakage, you know? So there you go. That's worth it. All right.
yeah. I mean, my point is, I don't want to prevent any company from making profit or say that big pharma goes away just because I say so.
right.
I want them to have R&D money. I do.
For sure.
I legitimately want big pharma to have R&D money.
And that is
But
kind of at the core of that, like 300% CEO kind of distortions of the thing, is not like 158 of it that should be going to R&D is not. And I think
Right.
that's more the problem, not necessarily that we don't want to totally force them out of profits, but the way they're allocating
yeah,
it currently is also incorrect and distorted and is not market optimum
Mm-hmm.
by any means.
Yeah.
This is literally, I mean, essentially what lobbying is though is you're setting the rules of your game instead of trying to compete with the game and trying to make the game as fair as possible and then compete fairly in the game. You're essentially paying a ton of money to make the game unfair. So you de facto can't be competed against.
Right.
And so thereby, they're taking money that should be optimum towards the market and research and is literally to favor the game Soviet Union style, so that they literally have a command control of that industry. And usually innovation all but arrests when one company has domination over one field, you know. And so we want a competitive, we want
yeah,
multiple pharmaceuticals, and they're a bunch of money's going into their R&D, and they're competing on Alzheimer's pills. That's market optimum capitalism to me. This is not. This is not.
Mm-hmm.
This is
Yeah.
this is them gaming the system to gain an advantage where they can't be competed against. That's not what I want my premium to
Not
go up
gonna
for.
happen.
And like you said, I'll be willing. I'd be willing to withstand. Like you said, a lot of us we willing to withstand price increases if it wasn't being allocated like this. If it
yeah.
was for the anal leakage pill or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
So
Or for roads or whatever. Yeah.
let me grab a drink. I'll be right back.
Yeah. Um, it's pretty crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, these things just can lead to rabbit holes of so many other avenues connected because there's so much intertwined in our government
But that's
versus
what's
just one thing, one fix, next thing,
yeah.
that fix. It's like, well, there's a lot of entanglement.
I was thinking the same thing. It's like all this kind of stuff that we're talking about boils down to just efficiency in our government and correct allocations of things in that sense. Because like if our government was more efficient in the way it did stuff, just on the most basic levels, I feel like a lot of this stuff would kind of be alleviated. There's
Me and
just so much stuff.
my efficient government is a very small government that is intended to protect its people.
Yeah.
Now, there have been benefits historically where governments will subsidize something like they started to subsidize airplanes, air travel, and then private companies came in and they took over and mastered air travel.
Right.
So there are things where governments come in, they'll subsidize space travel, and then it's private companies come in and they master space travel.
Right.
So there are times where there have been historically benefits for people that government has subsidized because who wants to be the first private company who's going to invest in all these airplanes to make air travel and possibly lose their fucking ass?
Nuclear.
No one really wants to do that.
Right. And usually they're unprofitable. Like the numbers just don't add up. So they'll have the best
Yeah.
accountants, and they're like the numbers just don't add up. That's when government can pour money, and we still get research on it. We still get development on it, but there's not any profit to be made for a while.
Right. Yeah.
And then private companies come in because there's a lot of legwork research, and then through now taxes, through quality of living, standard of living going up because of these things.
Good paying jobs,
from
it. Yeah.
There's so much that it can create. So there are little things that I do believe the government should be doing. I don't believe we should have no government, but they're fucking so big. They are
Oh yeah.
the
It's
single
ballooned
largest
and
employer in
ballooned
the
and
United States
ballooned,
too.
and then the lobbies are just pouring money while it balloons and the money, and so it's just this self feedback thing that's absurd. And I think I need to do research on this, but this is a very interesting thing too, and kind of speaks to what part of what our show is about is uh, that there needs to be other counterweights than just profit in a society to make it healthy, to make it balanced. Like everything, it needs balance. And because what I mean is the CEO to worker compensation ratio in the 1965 is when it was at its best range. And from what I understand, from 65 to now, there's never been any laws to force the CEO. So there wasn't a law back then. They did it because it was more morally correct. It created they believed it created a better community, better workers, better etc. Right. So the CEO to worker compensation ratio was 21 to 1 in 1965. So essentially, your CEO got 20 times more than you did. Now we are at 351 to 1.
Yeah.
So they have 351% to the average worker in the same company. These are those things where these distortions happen, and there's nobody forcing the government, there's nobody forcing their hand. But for some reason, the morality of being acceptable to pay one person 300 times more than the average worker. And that's where nobody is going to convince me that these CEOs are working 300 times more than a high level manager at Apple or Google or any of these companies or Exxon or any of them. It doesn't even matter which one it is. Or are they working their ass off? I have no doubt. The CEOs, they probably live and die and breathe their company. I get that 100%. But so do all those middle level managers, and they're not making that much. They're nowhere near that. And most of those workers are putting a lot of their lives into these jobs. And 20 to 1 sounds a lot more better for everybody than the 300 to 1 distortions of the current market. And but at the same time, I also don't want the government to have to forcibly impose a 20 to 1 on it.
Right.
That's what's so frustrating about, I think, the time we live in is we have this moral decadence and moral distortions, but we don't want to have the government to have to be the dad or whatever to come in and say,
Mm-hmm.
just do what you should, just do the right thing in the first fucking place and pay the guys a fair wage and pay yourself a fair wage. Instead, they have 5 houses, and the average worker can't afford one. And then they're all upset, and everyone's all turned around and highly politically charged. And we're wondering,
Mm-hmm.
well, how did it get this way? It's like just a little morality would go a long way. It would go a long way, and
Yeah, so
without any laws. Without any laws.
let's do a quick hypothetical. We take a town A, and town A actually goes back to the 1965
Ratio
CEO to ratio of what was it, 21?
20. Yeah, let's just round it off. 20 to 1. Right.
20 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
So they go from 300 and something to 1 to 20 to 1. Now all those workers have more expendable income. Now parents are able to probably pay more attention to their kids. Their
That's right.
kids aren't in after school programs running around on the streets because everyone's having these jobs, maybe even 2 jobs each, because the cost of living has gone up. You're strengthening that nuclear family
That's right.
household
Mm-hmm.
community. Kids are being paid attention to by their parents, so they're not seeking out to other kids for things. Grades are going up. You're just really improving the community. The more expendable income, guess what? They're paying more money at all these local
Right.
mom and pop shops.
Yeah.
There's just more exchange of dollars, and exchange of dollars is really what keeps that economy really healthy.
Especially ours. Ours is especially geared towards consumption. So it's like a 70% almost makes up the economy of consumption. So imagine if everyone had so much more to spend. The economy would be doing well. Those mom and pop shops would be doing nice. As well as, like you said, you probably have your best shot at getting back to a 1 worker per household scenario. In that case, then the other person, who it could be male or female or whoever, but the important thing is they could start to actually raise their children instead of send them to a daycare.
And then them getting older and being raised by social media.
So greedy for attention. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And there's just so much on children and the connection with their parents. And if they're seeing their parents for 2 hours a day, right? Maybe at dinner, not even having a sit down dinner because parents are so tired. and then them just going to bed and it's repeat forever, and they actually don't have a relationship with their parents. That's not good, man. That's how you get, high
Distortions,
incidents of,
unhealthy
incidents of
distortions.
kids going through juvie, prison systems. Like, there's so much data that shows just the,
And that is exactly, I think, at least part of what our show should be about is like, we don't want government to top down reform it, but we need to have other counterweights than just the profit. And we've got, I don't know where it went, how it happened. And we should definitely analyze how these distortions began. But man, I think that scenario that you're showing, I mean, even off the top of the hat, an easy cuff calculation can show just the material improvement of our society, our nation, and our communities by these, instead of, do they really need 5 other palaces? Can't just one palace be okay? You're still there's so much money flowing that the CEOs are still at 20-1. Man, they're gonna do great. It's not like they're short.
One thing I want to bring into this is, do you guys know the correlation of, I don't know how true this is, but the correlation of like psychopaths and CEOs?
For sure, yeah. There's always been a correlation. In fact, I was talking on the Zoom chat today about that, and that's always going to be the case. We should mitigate the sociopath behavior as much as possible, but they're also the drivers. So to a degree, it's essentially a gas and brake kind of scenario where they're getter-doners, but they also tend to want to control people and absorb power from other people. So they often unchecked become Hitlerites. But also they do drive things forward. So, but man, what a tough thing to balance. And I think to a degree, obviously with the 350-1, things have got, the gas has got, the brakes need to be repaired a little bit here.
And I think it's a characteristic, not their character.
Right. Yeah.
So,
and it's definitely not all CEOs. I don't want to blank.
No, it's really not. And I think it's
something. But it's enough of them, though. I mean, the polls have shown it's enough of them that that behavior tends to gravitate. But it makes sense. You want to control, manage people. You want to dominate people. That's where you go, right?
In that sense.
I mean, it's logical, but yeah. And like I said, I don't think they should medicate that out of people or somehow come up with some magical, psychology to try to. You're never going to remove that. Humans have been trying to compete for so many hundreds of thousands of years that it's literally within an array of the population. Say 1/5 is going to be sociopathic and highly driven, and one's going to be real chill and just like do whatever, And and then there's going to be an array of that range in the rest of the population. Mm-hmm. I think to a degree, in just evolutionary, just like growth and balance, that's always going to be a factor. Like if you take another population somewhere else, 1/5 of the population is always going to be that way. It's just nature balancing itself out like it always does. So if we accept that and learn to work with it instead of try to like ADD suppress it or something, like something like that. That's not helpful.
I think it's ingrained in us as human beings. I mean, you look at a pack of wolves or a pack of lions, whoever is leading that pack got to be a little psychopathic, going, hey, guess what? I'm going to be the first one to bite this 2,000-pound buffalo right in his fucking ass.
And all the others are like, you're crazy, bro. You're crazy.
Yeah. We've talked about this before, Alex. We're going back into the old medieval ages. You wanted someone who is slightly psychopathic on that sense on your team.
For sure. Yeah, exactly. For a good battle, if the battle's in the mix and you need a push to win it, you have that crazy. You unleash the crazy guy and he busts the hole right through the shield wall. And
there's definitely a need for it evolutionarily wise. So it's it's not something. It's like it's those double-edged swords. It's like it is destructive.
Right. It's a double-edged sword factor. Yeah, absolutely.
So it goes to that Jordan Peterson quote: "A gentle man is not a good man."
Right.
A dangerous man who has it under voluntary control and used for the good and is civilized is a good man.
Yep.
Right. And that essentially talks about the gas and the brake, and essentially in that quote. And that's what I mean. Both on a society level as well, though, we do need to put the brakes on these things because 350-1, and it spiraled so fast that these are those kind of things that guys, you guys are in your towers talking to each other, saying that 350 is acceptable to 1. That's not. It just isn't, and it's causing these huge market distortions. we're in a consumption economy. You're paying your workers less. The people who buy shit, you're
That's what
paying
makes
them
no
less
sense.
and less.
It's such a short term, like, thought out idea.
It is.
If you were to give these people more money, in a sense, that money would come back to you in some theory or some.
They'll buy
Absolutely.
more iPhones and MacBooks.
Right.
It does,
Yeah. I mean, it's
especially
like
because Americans are so programmed to consume so much, and they do. You give them money, they will, and so it's the fact that we don't have it. That's really,
dude,
it's literally
insane.
putting the brakes on an economy that otherwise could even be more voracious. And it's one of those things that you're just like, that's a pretty big indicator. Now, in the bigger scheme of things of the full economy, is that money like truly hugely impactful? You know, when they're doing these polls, these companies are not a huge amount of the total economy. But to me, it's more of a reflection of these distortions of things that just, we don't need laws, but if you were just took a more healthy approach, man, it would help everybody. Like in that town, the scenario you're talking about, just it would help.
It reflects the
if
culture
it's done on a macro level across scale. I do believe that it would have an impact because we talk about.
You're probably right.
People
You're
talk
probably
about
right.
wanting a $15 an hour, like minimum wage, and then next thing you know, it's gonna be a $20 minimum hour, $20 an hour minimum wage. And I've always said, well, anyone who understands basic business and economic fundamentals, that's not a good idea because they're entry-level jobs. But now if you actually revert back to that 1965 model of the 20 to 1,
right,
then it makes sense because you're just reallocating funds that are already in your business. You're not having to put that price back on the consumer because now instead of a $2 coffee, you have to give a $5 coffee to make up for that giant increase in that minimum wage. But you can keep your product price the same.
That's the whole thing about these numbers. This is money that the company's already brought in, and they're reallocating it 350 to 1 to themselves. It's like it's not like the company needs to bring more in to meet these numbers. This is numbers that they've already essentially captured, and what they're doing with the captured funds. So that's where you're like, damn, like reality check, fellas out there. And again, I think you're right. It would actually have some pretty strong knock-on effects because often I think these polls are often the top, the big 500 companies, et cetera, et cetera. And those wages, of course, we know the coders will make anywhere from 100 to 300,000 a year, stuff like that. And that's the current structure. Imagine if we gave them a lot more, they would be spending a whole bunch more. So it probably has a disproportionate impact because they're such high earners to begin with. That that's more times that they're spending buying cars, and more car salesmen's got better jobs and they're getting better pay, and then they can go buy more groceries and spend more time at the movies, or even spend more time at Wild Island, et cetera, et cetera.
It just
so
seems
Wild
like
Island does better.
Such a short-term play for them. I don't get it.
Germany and Japan and stuff, their manufacturing is a larger part of their overall economy than ours, but we've literally tooled ours to be consumption, and therefore it's like a big fueling machine that can fuel itself. But somehow we're like forgetting the major thing that if it's not geared for exports and it's geared for consumption, then people need to consume. What do they need to do that?
Okay.
And we have to have money to consume things to do that in the first place. So
how do you consume?
I got something for you. I do think it would move the needle a little bit because I just looked up from 2022. There's a list of the top 200 highest paid CEOs in the United States. 200.
That's it. 200 people out of 300 million.
And the number 200 sucks to be last on this list. Still makes $20 million a year salary.
$20 million a year, though.
And maybe that's where and that's not a ton, but it's not bad. But then when you got guys like Jeff Green, his salary is $834 million a year salary.
Okay, so but with this, we have to keep in mind relative numbers, right? So we have to think about what they're making. So the guy making $20 million a year relative to what that company brings in could be not a lot, or it could be none at all. You know what I'm saying? Like if the company's making $100 million a year or something like that, and he's only pulling 10, then he's doing pretty good. But if the company's only making 20 million, 25 million a year, he's pulling 20.
In total.
Then the relative, you gotta
But it's a relative in the sense that is probably a few percent of the company's total revenue. Most of the time, it's not going to take an enormous chunk of their total revenue, because then it would cripple any company's, operating.
Yeah.
So it's not even, but that's per year. So that same dude on the lowest end, in 5 years of our lives, he made $100 million. So that's the kind of things that massively distorted. Imagine spreading that out over 20 years. He's a CEO or he's a member on the board for 20 years.
We got to kind of cut that in half just due to taxes, because we want to make sure they're taking home a good amount.
That is true too.
Warner Brothers, $250 million salary a year.
It is true. It is they're getting taxed heavily, but essentially de facto all the Americans are too. So since we're all in the same boat right now with the income tax, we're all getting hammered pretty hard. But they have so much more left at the end of the day.
Yeah.
This is in a backdrop of 2019 median income in the United States is $31,000. So more or less, more accurate than the average would be the median, and that's where like most people are. A lot of the population is sitting around is 31,000, and this dude's getting 21 million or 20 million a year. So
and he's in last on the
he's in last place.
Tim Cook only pays himself $100 million a year.
Only, but yeah, and he's probably being very generous for how much Apple makes.
That's what I was going to say. Relative to Apple's numbers, that's actually really pretty decent. For sure. Because for how much Apple makes, that's
for sure. But at the end of the day, I mean, let's do a little quick Zillow search. How many houses? How many palaces? What $100 million a year,
dude? Really? Yeah.
How much do you need, bro?
I'll take 1 million. I'll take 1 million, dude. I'll be good on one, dude.
Companies like Apple, or even the Trade Desk, which is the $800 million a year, they can afford that 20, because then you just have your guys starting at $200,000, and you're still making so much.
That is the important thing. Yeah,
you don't even have to go to 21. A company like Apple, it could be 100 to 1.
Absolutely, and that is the important thing to explain, is that it's only a few percentage of the company's revenue. We're not talking like these CEOs are like sucking away the company's like money just to pay themselves. Yeah. There's so much money coming into these companies that it's only a small amount. But imagine if you better allocated that amount. Just that alone, because of how huge the numbers are.
And we got to remember, they're not the only executive. How much are they paying their COOs? How much are they paying their CTOs? How much are they paying the president, the vice president? They're all still making hundreds of millions in salary a year as well with them. Yeah, they're not all of a sudden just making $80,000.
In an environment where the median isn't like 100,000, the median is 31,000. So it'd be different if the median of the whole population of the U.S. was doing much better. Right. It's also in that we also have to. That's another thing of that is the comparison is, let's say that the overall population had a higher median. Then that's more acceptable for sure to pay themselves 20. But we're talking about 20 or 800 in an environment where they're making 31,000 on median. That's rough, man. That's
we wouldn't even be having this conversation if things were.
I'd be totally fine with that. If the median overall and everyone was much doing better. And again, these median, the 31,000, that's your consumer. That's your 70% of the economy. So you're squeezing them. So. That's insane.
Such a short-term plan.
I don't even know how they survive, honestly.
Right.
That's why the whole system is under strain.
Also, probably a huge contributor for why, Alex, how much did consumer credit card debt just hit?
I sent you that link. It just soared past $1 trillion.
$1 trillion.
In just credit card debt, just people just swiping, dude. That's it.
And I think that's a part of it. Dude, when you're only making 31 and your girlfriend or boyfriend and you're living together only making 31.
Sure.
You guys fucking got credit cards racked up.
That's deficit spending, dude. And that's, I think we're getting to the point of what we're saying overall is that the system's under strain here, fellas. Is like this system of 20 million in a median 30,000 situation. The system's under strain. This is not sustainable. This is very short term thinking.
Yeah,
and it's going to have a bad impact.
That's why it drives me nuts when not to bring family in this, but in that email thread, when I asked Dan, how you fix the debt, and he's like, well, check out the Social Security link. It's like, that's fucking nothing to do with what we're trying to fix, though.
That's the like people want to just like make a law for it to fix it, but that's exactly what I was trying to get at is like it's weird and it's hard to explain, and hopefully we can explain it better over time, but a little bit of morality to counterweight just money in a system, in a society, in a culture, in a way of thinking needs to be kind of a counterweight sustainability. However
Yeah.
you find your way to get there, that's the hard part, obviously. But there needs to be something to counterweight, because if it's just a not all of them, but a lot of the sociopaths hanging out with each other, telling each other, let's pay each other more constantly, and then there's no actual law pushing down on it, it's like, man, it just would be really great for all of us if they did it on their own out of doing the right thing. And it's not like it, again, we have precedents. They did it in 1965. It's not like we're talking about some theoretical impossibility here. They've already done that, where they were like, I'm going to be
I wonder what the
reasonable and pay
difference is
myself
now.
20, you know.
Well,
Is it the culture that's different now? I wonder
I would
what
say
There's
so,
happened.
different
yeah.
aspects.
That's
Yeah.
at least part of it. It's got to be, to a degree, for sure. Because the numbers just don't add up. I mean, again, like let's go to Zillow, look at the most expensive real estate quickly. When you're talking about these numbers, like what are they? I mean, like there's only so much to buy. There's only so many islands you could get. There's only so many palaces that you could buy when you're making that a year in income.
Yeah.
So it's just crazy.
Yeah, I think we gotta fix the tax code as well, because we gotta reel in government, because inflation is the walking death of the indirect tax to the middle and lower class.
Mm-hmm.
They're the
For
ones
sure.
who hurt the most. So I mean, and then it's like, how do we get, like you were saying, these CEOs to be like, okay, how can we take care of the
Yeah, that's
not by
such a good
force,
point.
but
Yeah.
morally do that?
And there's
Fix our
many,
taxes,
yeah.
fix the money, man.
And there's many other like moral examples like that I come across when I'm reading about economics, stuff like that. And I'm just like, man, if they did it on their own without some government mandate, then so many things would just kind of fall into place on their own without any government intervention or
Yeah.
some
I
other
think
program that requires bureaucrats.
I think that kind of pokes into a deeper issue where money is kind of trumping morality on all bases. You know what I mean?
Right. And I think, in my opinion, everything needs a healthy balance. The universe is built on it. And in that respect, anything, including capitalism, can get too far into an unhealthy zone. It isn't
Yeah.
by itself a perfect system. It can be pushed into unhealthy ranges, but it can also sit in a nice, healthy range where everyone benefits. And it's the least amount of losers and the least amount of people to miss out on opportunities. And it can get pushed into too far of, obviously, Soviet Union labor market stagnation, and too far the other way. But the thing about it is that if it gets too far, I think anything can get pushed into an unhealthy range,
Right.
and that's just my opinion on it. But
Yeah.
that's it just seems that way when you're talking about these kind of huge distortions that are way different than they even used to be a few years ago.
I think we should end it on this topic. Otherwise, we're going to go another hour.
For sure, easily.
I'm going to go help get the kiddos ready for bed.
Sounds good.
Alex, Howard, and I were talking about we need to do this every week.
Oh yeah, for sure. If we could do it consistently,
going,
damn, you know what I mean?
We'll always start off talking about our business that we're doing together, and then we can jump into the pod.
I'm looking at some pretty significant properties here, and they're like 9 million, and this is in Nevada and Reno and stuff, like 9 million, stuff like that. But that's you pay that one time, and then the next year you get another 10 mil, including minus taxes. Then you get the next year you get another 10 mil. Like, how many these do you need? And that's these kind of distortions that it's just unhealthy.
So I'll
But
tell
absolutely.
you a cool thing today that I did when I left Alex or Howard. So Alex, remember how I told you I had that client that I was like, I'm gonna do this work for free and for a long-term thing?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I had a meeting with that client today, and I showed him a $10 million home And then I showed him an $8 million home, and he texted me this evening, put in that offer for me on the $8 million home. And don't get me wrong, this house. Oh, so here's the cool thing: the amount of money that he's going to be making just this year alone, by him moving from California to the great state that we live in, the money he'll save on the income tax in California alone is going to pay for this house.
Oh my God! Holy shit!
That's California taxes.
That's gross, dude.
There's another distortion right there. Exactly.
So gross.
Yeah.
And this house is gorgeous, man. I'm like, man, one day.
Is that the MMA fighter? That MMA fighter?
He's not MMA. He's a professional boxer.
Oh, okay.
And Nevada totally is a non-income tax, and they talk about, you can't even pave the roads without it. Well, Nevada's not doing too bad without it. I'd say it's pretty lean and mean. Seems to be doing okay. The roads aren't. They aren't great, but
they're getting worse. But yeah,
it's not like it's not like they're dirt roads. So
yeah, right. Yeah, the roads at least. Yeah,
the roads. And but yeah, like 9 million, 10 million, like dude's paying 10 million house, stuff like that. And I'm sure there's much more expensive houses. It's just Zillow, but either way, they don't need this much, I think, and that would help a lot. But that's just one example of many where we should go through these and try to highlight some of these things, where any economy is both government mandates as well as people's behaviors and decisions and policies, the two to come together in the middle, and that's called the economy. We should highlight both of them because both have room to improve, not just the government, not just all the people's fault. It's neither. It's both. We could do better.
Yeah, we got to unravel everything that's intertwined because too often people will say, "Well, I would just do this."
It's just this.
But so many things are intertwined that we got to get it.
The nuance.
We got to cure it all, not just one symptom.
Absolutely. It feels psychologically good for some reason to just blame it on one thing or take one super pill or whatever, but it never works like that. It just simply doesn't work like that.
Yeah, like when someone sends you a link, just have the rich people pay more Social Security.
Right, stuff like that. Yeah, like, I wish it was that simple, and then Lord of the Rings and fairies. And
yes. Oh, yeah, Elon, pay more on Social Security. That'll fix our debt problem.
And also as much as that is as the abysmal rate of people actually, when they're told to save, they don't. Those kind of things meet halfway in the middle, so sure they could pay more, but also people take control of your own lives and don't blame others for things and decisions that you are doing. Man up, grab the bootstraps and do that as well. With those two getting improved, then the economy will improve, not just one magic pill of tax the rich or whatever the new thing is.
All right, guys. Well, I'm going to head out.
Hell yeah.
Let's do it again this week.
Thanks for watching the High Mark Podcast.
Yes, I'm Jesse Carstairs, Alex Flanagan, Ty/Howard Flanagan. This was episode 2, and it was fucking good. If you guys didn't like it, don't try episode 3.
Like, subscribe, and comment. And if you're economist, try to give us some points on what we were talking about.
Yeah, tell us what we're wrong about.
DM us, and we'll feature you.
Exactly. Right on. Peace, fellas.
All right, guys. I'll see you.